Mike, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you being here. Mike actually is a contributor to Bitcoin Magazine. He's got some great articles for Bitcoin Magazine. He's a Bitcoiner. He's a big on health and fitness. Really have enjoyed our conversations in the past. Mike also is an Army aviation veteran, and so he brings kind of a wealth of knowledge in the health arena and in the Bitcoin arena. And I was really looking forward to having you on, Mike. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, man. I would have to say that I appreciate you asking me to do it because I just like to talk. In case you haven't noticed, so like let's talk. Let's talk about Bitcoin. Let's talk about fitness. I'll talk about all of it.
Right on, right on. Yeah, I mean, I was scrolling through your articles and I read a few of them, and they're really really good. The one where you
Thank
went
you.
over Bitcoin reviving the American dream. That's something I want to talk about with you. Just kind of start us out. How does Bitcoin revive the American dream? And if you want to go a little bit more, we'll talk about it right now on the podcast. But also, all Mike's articles will be linked in the description down there if you want to go check them out over at Bitcoin Magazine. But yeah, if you could just kind of go over that. How does Bitcoin revive the American dream to you?
Wow. Yeah, you picked the one that one of the ones I got probably the most philosophical about. So I enjoyed writing that one. How like my argument for how Bitcoin revives the American dream was like growing up. And I'm sure you probably could attest to this. Is that looking back at post World War II America, like seeing like the videos of the parades celebrating all the soldiers and everybody coming back, and celebrating Victory Day and all of the business and all of like the economic boom that came from everybody returning home and spending all of their military money. Um, but most importantly, in my opinion, would be how back in those days, an individual or a household could afford to purchase a house or a car on maybe 1 year's salary, or like usually less than. Um, and but then you fast forward to today, and we've got families that I think the average number of jobs per two adult household was 2.3 jobs. So that's a very basic, simple statistic, but the fact that the average number of jobs is greater than the number of adults in the household is already a problem, in my opinion. Like that's that right there speaks magnitudes of how far inflation has taken us. And then you consider how at the same time those households have likely taken out a mortgage that ranges somewhere from 10 to nowadays 30-year mortgages that get 0% interest or damn near close. Like the American dream should be attainable, like easily attainable, in my opinion. And the way that Bitcoin gets us maybe closer back to that would be because of the nature of Bitcoin, because it's operating outside the purview of a government or like a Federal Reserve type entity, and it's free of inflation for like similar reasons. If you take security seriously and as far as it can go, it becomes unseizable. And then the nature that Bitcoin is also uncensorable. Like you can you and I could send money to each other, and as long as we send it to the right address, nobody can stop us. Um, what an asset like that does is, if you're an individual who is just saving in it, like not trying to trade it, and maybe even if you're throwing all your money in it that you have in savings, but you continue to just save in it and it appreciates in value, regardless of whether it continues the 200% CAGR that so many of us like to talk about. Even if it's at 5% CAGR, it's still doing better than inflation. And at that point, if an individual, we'll get into the family dynamics, but when an individual is capable of saving in something like that, it doesn't matter necessarily the amount that they're consistently saving in, but they can save in an asset that is likely to appreciate in value over time. Because I mean, I say that because we're not wizards, right? We don't have a crystal ball. We can't guarantee that something's going to go up in value. Um, But when someone like myself, who is capable, who is like a single individual who has no family, like no dependents to worry about, like I can save my money in an asset like Bitcoin, and I know for sure it's at least going to maintain its purchasing power as far as like one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Um, when you can save in an asset like that, and you can slowly accumulate wealth over time as a strategy, because I think you and I would both agree that right now nobody can save as a wealth generating strategy. Like if you save right now, you're literally losing money, or you're losing purchasing power, more accurately. And with Bitcoin, it's the exact opposite. You're gaining purchasing power as more people around the world come to the realization that Bitcoin is something different. And that's what all financial markets across the world are looking for right now. You can't put money in bonds, or you can, but you're basically an idiot if you do. Um, you can't put money in the stock market. Again, you can, but I think we would all argue it is this everything on the stock market is wildly overvalued, or overpriced. And when an individual, going back to the individual, when an individual is capable of slowly accumulating wealth, and you get to the point, the individual gets to the point where they can afford to take more risk, because they have a capital cushion to fall back on. um but at the same time, that capital cushion also operates as a psychological cushion, because I don't know your background, Rob, but like if you've ever been to the point where you're not just living paycheck to paycheck, but like you're like probably in the negative. Like I've been there. Um, it doesn't feel good. Like everything stresses you out, because you don't know if you're going to be able to make it to that next paycheck to actually afford to pay rent, or like your heating bill. Or most people in that kind of situation can't afford health insurance. So like you're freaking out trying to make sure that you're not getting sick, you're not getting hurt, you're not taking risks that could actually get you sick or get hurt. Um, Whereas, like in that kind of scenario, most people end up like, kind of falling back on drugs and alcohol and stuff like that to escape their reality. But when an individual is capable of saving in Bitcoin and just like being patient and stacking sats and like continuously just building up that capital cushion, it gives them the psychological and the emotional and the spiritual freedom to maybe take a risk on something where they actually could maybe not make it big, but they could ascend to another level of net worth, or they could save up to the point of where maybe they can take a loan out and get a better car so they can drive to work and like be more on time. Or they're an individual who saves up some money, and then maybe they're like they want to write a book and they want to sell it to some people, and like that gets them to the point where they can increase their income or increase their output or increase their efficiency. um we don't have something like that right now. And when the individual is capable of doing that, then the individual can also spend time, possibly actually, like while they're doing this stuff, finding out who they really are, like philosophically. And we can talk about this if you want, because I have lots of theories on what's going on right now, like as a society as a whole, especially in America. But
Well,
right now, I
just
think,
to touch on what you just talked about, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to go back to what you're talking
oh,
about
you're good.
saving in something that's deflationary, because that's something that's just completely out of the realm of understanding of the general population right now, of actually saving something that is going to be deflationary, that actually holds its value or appreciates in its buying power due to being deflationary. I totally agree with that, and it's like it's true. My background when I was I was waiting tables for a while, didn't work out very well. There was a period of my life where I was living in the back of my car. It wasn't quite paycheck to paycheck, but I had like $5,000 in savings, kind of traveling around trying to figure things out. And so I know what it's
Okay.
like when you're sitting there and you're trying to figure things out. You're barely just getting by, sort of thing. And what is crazy to think about is most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, like you're talking about. This is most
Yeah.
Americans. And
Yeah.
so that when you realize that, it's like, well, what's the biggest crime on humanity, in modern humanity? Not talking about the past. In today's day and age, what's the biggest crime? People working a deflationary wage for an inflationary currency. It should be the other way
Yes.
around. And
Exactly.
that's how we get that chain around our ankle, because we're working a deflationary wage. It's the same. You're making the same $4,000 every month, making the same $3,000 every month. You're not getting paid 40% more money just because they injected 40% more dollars into the system. They're not
That'd be
changing their
nice, wouldn't
wages.
it?
Yeah, but they're not doing that. So it's like, but all that we feel is the pain of going to the gas pump and saying, "Oh, my gas is now $5 a gallon." Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting. How crazy is that? But I'm still
And your
making the same.
groceries.
But my boss doesn't care. My boss is paying me the same amount. So it's like, that's the thing that you're just talking about, and I just wanted to stress how big of a deal that is, because I couldn't agree more that the idea is, whether you're for or against Bitcoin, the truth is, if you had something that was deflationary to save in, and some people believe it's gold, some people believe it's silver, some people think it's platinum, some people think it's Bitcoin. I tend to be in a crowd of kind of both, not much in gold, but in the utility precious metals and Bitcoin. But I just wanted to touch on just like the idea of actually understanding that the Austrian economic model is sound, pun intended.
Pun intended, yeah. And then because like what we were just discussing was the effects on the individual, right? But then when an individual in that boat is capable of taking a bigger, or maybe we could argue a better risk towards like building a future. Imagine when two individuals, a man and a woman, or man and a man, or woman and a woman, whatever. Imagine if two individuals of the same likeness like meet, and then maybe they hit it off, and then they want to form a family. I think we could all argue that individuals in like both of those kinds of mindsets, where they are capable of saving in an asset that is deflationary, that is appreciating in purchasing power. Imagine how much stronger their family is going to develop in that kind of environment, versus a family that is working 2.3 or 2.5, or 3 jobs across two adult individuals, where one of them is trying to like help raise the child while the other one's working 2 jobs or something like that, and they don't have an asset to save in. They're constantly stuck on the hamster wheel. And consider the effects that has on the child, because their parents aren't capable of spending a proper amount of quality family time with the child, and the child's just being raised by a nanny or a daycare or whatever. um I'm not trying to insinuate any sort of like um conclusions here, but like I think we can all start to agree that there's going to be some very serious like kind of negative feedback loop effects on this entire system, because then eventually those children are going to like go to school and grow up, and then they're going to learn, or they're going to go to school and then they're not going to learn about economics and monetary theory like none of us did, and then they're going to be thrown into this system that is really, it's I would argue predatory. Like it's pretty predatory for an 18-year-old to get thrown into this world, and then you're expected to either go to college and get a degree that is so saturated beyond belief that you're going to go into like $50,000 in debt just to get a job where you didn't need that degree to begin with. Which, I mean, hopefully a lot of children nowadays are going into the trade schools, because that's where the demand is.
Well, what's so
But yeah,
crazy about that? What's so crazy about that is like they'll give away those loans, like because I know how hard it is to get a loan, so I literally will give the bank 20 grand to get a secured loan against my own 20 grand, just so I can build credit underneath my LLC. Like I'm going out of my way to try to build credit up so that they will give me a loan. But if I'm an 18-year-old kid that doesn't know what's going on, haven't been schooled on any of this stuff, anything about monetary theory, I'm going to go over and just get a loan for 100 grand, 50 grand, 200 grand, and be able to go to any school I want pretty much just by showing them that I had a 4.0 in high school or whatever. It's crazy.
yeah,
But then when that happens, then on top, once that goes down the pipeline, then you got people like Elizabeth Warren out there that'll be all of a sudden, well, even though they got in debt, we're going to get the person that's working hard. We're going to get Mike Hobart over here. We're going to get Rob Soltan over here. And we're going to get them to pay your bills for you because you messed up and got in a bunch of debt. Now we're going to pay your bills for you because we're smart enough not to get in debt. We're going to pay it for you according to Elizabeth Warren. This is a great idea that she has. So it's just crazy to think about how out of line it's become with this American dream, you know, and like I guess the next thing I wanted to I want to bring in towards is what is like how do you define the American dream? What is your definition of what the American dream is and how it's like because we're talking about how it's drifted, but what is it
Yeah.
to you now? Like
I think the American dream should be capable of being applied to anywhere in the globe. I don't think it should necessarily be the American dream. I just use that as like is a pretty well accepted or well understood concept. But I think that the dream should be that any individual or any family can save in a money or an asset that is free of devaluation by any individual group or country. I mean, because like as like that's probably the way I see it is that's like the most kind of all encompassing and can really touch like anybody on the planet. Um, because I think it's I think it's extremely unfair for an individual or a family to sacrifice their time towards earning a wage and they can't just simply save up that time in the form of a money to be able to ascend to a better standard of living. I think that that is probably one of the biggest thefts of our species really. Cuz like and that's also one of my articles that I wrote about is like how Bitcoin changes your kind of perception or value of time. Um, because ultimately that's what like all the wages are that we all work for, whether you're a creator or you're working for an employer. A wage or your revenue or your income is you're agreeing to sacrifice your time, effort, and energy for a specific amount of compensation, and ultimately that compensation is what you are accepting like the as being worth of your time and energy. And when you earn that, um, I it I don't think anybody should necessarily have to be subject to it being inflated away, or granted, or being stolen, which would be capable through CBDCs, because essentially, when we get down to brass tacks here, the inflation rate of the money that wages are measured in is ultimately time theft, and I I I feel I get really kind of I can get down spiritually and emotionally when I think about the like out of what there's 300 or 350 million Americans or something like that. This probably 95% of them don't understand that very I wouldn't say basic dynamic, but once you understand like trade and monetary theory and economics, they don't understand that very basic rule inflation is time theft.
so true.
And when we get to that point, um, I wonder how many years of individuals' lives could have been like saved or better spent not working to earn US dollars. I wonder if that kind of math is capable of being done. Somebody probably like Lynn Alden could probably do it, but I can't.
So if you could go over the statistics of that, that'd just be wild. It's just like, okay, well, X amount of inflation and you're making $4,000 a month. And when you talk about time, money is time because it's stored time. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you're willing to give up 60 hours a week for like I have a brother, my brother, he's, you know, he does the 60-hour a week thing, you know, and he's working one of those type salary jobs. And so you're giving up, you know, 240 hours a month of your life 240 hours for that paycheck. So if you're making
Yeah.
$5,000 a month, you're giving up that 240 hours of your life. You start multiplying that. You multiply 240 by 12. You start realizing this is, you know, after all the years go on, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of your
Is that
life.
like 300? That's like three. Oh man, that's a lot.
That number to me is like the one thing that I saw is like the most valuable thing that ever happened to me was when I took 24/7, 365. When I finally controlled all of my time and I just did it at all costs, which for me at one point was just living out of my car and just going coffee shop to coffee shop with an iPhone. That was pretty much like, but the amount of peace I had at that time in my life, there's times where I think I was happier then than I am now. But I still have full control of my time, but it's like I always am looking for the next big thing or whatever. But when you talk about time theft, that hits home big, because what are we capable? And then it's not only like you're giving up your time, but you're also giving up your energy. And so we're gonna get into health and stuff as well. But when you're working that job, you have this, like, some people work, like when I was a waiter, I remember coming home and just being like, dude, I just want to drink a beer and go to bed. Like, I don't even want to do anything. I'm over it. I just talked to a bunch of ritzy people all day. They bossed me around like I'm just a piece of crap. And this is terrible. I just want to go to bed. And then I wake up and I do it again the next day. And then you do it again. It's just soul taking. But you're giving up your time, you're giving up your energy. But then what you're being compensated in is a melting ice cube. And it's like, okay, and then if I want to keep that ice cube frozen, I can give it to the bank, who won't even pay me a percent. They won't even pay me a penny on the dollar at the banks now. So I remember when I was a kid, and when you were a kid, we just get like 6%, 7%.
They'll charge you a maintenance fee for it too.
And $35 a wire transfer, 15 incoming, $50 to send money in large quantities anywhere. It's like, it's just insane that the people don't. And they'll say like, oh, well, I could put it in the stock market or all this and that. I look at the stock market as not real custody. I mean, who owns their stock? TD Ameritrade does, or E-Trade, or Robinhood, or whoever. And that's not real custody. Like, people say, oh, it's going to protect my money if I invest in the S&P or whatever. It's like, you don't have custody of your money. They have custody of it. And you better hope that their app works at the right time. You better hope they pick up their phone line at the right time, because when everything was hitting the fan in 2007, a lot of those apps crashed. A lot of those computers weren't working. A lot of those phone lines weren't getting picked up. People were on hold. There wasn't enough people at TD Ameritrade to pick up the line. So it's
you're using Robinhood and they just shut off trading, or they shut off selling.
Yeah,
shutting off selling was probably going to be the worst part, because if you're crunched and the market is collapsing like it was in March 2020, good luck. It's not your money anymore. You can't
100%.
sell it, so it's not your money.
Oh man, the Robinhood situation, like when GameStop happened and they literally made it so you can only sell. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. So you're sitting there and you're just watching it just tank in price, and you can't do anything about it but sell. It's like that kind of thing is like, people finally will understand what self-custody really is. And so, I mean, there's only so many people can figure out what the gold standard was. And something I'm really thankful for about Bitcoin, and kind of glamorizing it to the younger audiences, they were learning about the gold standard where they never would have before. I remember when I was a waiter, I had no idea what the gold standard was. This is when I was 22. I'm 28 now. So just 6 years ago, I had no idea what I was talking about when it came to the gold standard. No idea about any of this stuff.
Most people still think we're on it.
Yeah.
Most people still think that the dollar is backed by gold. Like, most of the people that I've talked to over the last 2 years. I'm like, you realize that hasn't been true.
Yeah, bro, it's in Fort Knox,
years.
bro. It's in Fort Knox. It's there. It's back there somehow, some way.
Where it's all Chinese bars of gold that are hollowed out.
That's such a good point, is the auditing of Bitcoin. That's so overlooked.
Or the Federal Reserve.
Exactly. I mean, we with Bitcoin, you can audit immediately how much is held in which wallet in which location
every 10 minutes.
But with gold, we're trusting that are they walking by with a fancy X or F gun, because they're a $20,000 gun. You got to go touch every single bar with it and make sure that those bars are pure gold. And
that's another ridiculous thing. You got to spend $20,000 just to even
for a high end one, yeah.
Real. To hopefully prove it's real. And like, where a Bitcoin node is what, like $200 maybe.
It's the argument is like, gold bugs hate me for pointing this out, because I'm big in industrial precious metals, because if I'm given the choice of which tangible item, if I'm talking about a true tangible or a collectible, it's like, do I want to hold the one that is held in all the central banks around the world and has just been sitting in a vault? It's an indestructible metal, and it's a very beautiful, lustrous metal. It has electrical qualities, things like this, but it's not eaten up by industry at this price point. It's just not. Like 5% of it is. So
consider
it makes no sense.
how much industry would probably be improved if gold wasn't wildly overpriced. Because I'm sorry, but as jewelry and like as art, that is not a use case. Like, I'm sorry. Like, anybody can argue it, but this is my belief point. By gold being used for jewelry, not a utility case
I
at
would
all.
agree.
Imagine
I would agree.
imagine how good our phones and our electronics would be for like just conductivity and everything if gold was cheap to use.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be astonishing to see what the true price point. It might actually, if technology might increase so much that it might actually raise the price of gold once it finally does get eaten up by industry. Like, it'd take a little while. It might be like a temporary crash to get it to that point where it made sense to actually use it in our electric cars and our iPhones and all these different things, to use it at more scale, in the tech world. But the thing is, silver and copper are highly conductive. Gold is very conductive as well, but silver is actually, I believe, more reflective than gold. So they're using silver in solar panels because it's the most reflective metal. It's also
Oh,
has
so
like
it's a better
antibacterial.
insulator then.
There's a lot of qualities of silver that outpace gold in certain arenas. Like the
Okay, that makes
antibacterial
sense.
aspect of it is very interesting with silver. Like, the whole term silverware. It's because, like, if you ate with silverware, the bacteria won't stick to your silverware. So, like, that's why they use it in their
Wow, I did not
silverware.
know that.
So, like, people will, oh yeah, get the silverware. It's because, like, a fancy silverware is because it would be healthy. It's
But it'd
bacteria
have to
can't
be
stick to it.
real silver at that point.
Yeah, or sterling, at least sterling. They would
Okay.
do like 92.5% silver. But yeah, silver. If you look into like the industrial uses of, like, platinum's like 90% of it's used in industry, so 10% of it's held in bullion form, but it's also a market cap in the hundreds of billions, whereas gold's 12 trillion, 11, 12 trillion. So it's like,
Yeah.
if you have like a market cap that's in the hundreds of billions and you have silver at like 1.4, 1.3 trillion range, and then, I mean, they're actually being eaten up. More than 50% of the supply is being eaten up by industry year over year. So it's like, that's interesting to me when it comes to tangible. But with gold, when I think about it as money, I just think of Bitcoin being a better money. And it's hard to say that, because what their argument would be is, well, my gold's indestructible. Doesn't matter if an EMP goes off, doesn't matter if anything happens, it's indestructible. But Bitcoin, what a lot of people don't understand is the node network of Bitcoin and how strong that node network is becoming. Eventually, you'd have to nerf the entire world to stop it, because, and then even then, it might be in the satellites. So it's like, you can't really, at this point, it's getting to a point where, like, once you understand that how Bitcoin works, it's like you almost hope society can come together and say, hey, it's time. It was time for a
I
universal
I th-
sound money,
I I'm very optimistic. I think eventually society will get there. Because right now we're just going through kind of a global, just like like a whole global reaction to like how everybody reacted to the internet and Wi-Fi. It's like, well, what's an email? I can send a letter just fine. I don't need that. It's like, yeah, well, we'll see. You're wrong, but we'll see. We'll just sit back and watch.
It's true. You ever watch those old videos where it's like, the internet? What's the what? No, like I remember when Steve Ballmer was. That's one of the biggest ones for me. Was when Steve Ballmer went out and was like, an iPhone. Who's gonna buy a $700 phone? Nobody's gonna buy a $700 phone. That's crazy. And this is back in
Wrong.
2007.
Yep.
Yeah, how did that work out, Steve Ballmer? He's like, oh, we have the Zune Media Player. The Zune Media Player. I remember when that was fancy when I was a kid. Zune Media. Oh, you got a Zune or Zoom or whatever. It's like, I think, no, Zune.
I forgot about those.
Dude, those were like the big deal back when we were younger. I was like, oh man, you got a Zune. Oh, dude, that's like the fancy thing. And then the iPhone came out, it was just like gone. The iPod and the iPhone just ruined it and just didn't have a
Yep.
chance anymore. So it's like Bitcoin might be doing that. And then finally, we're seeing, like, Hillary just came out and was talking about, oh, we're scared of these cryptocurrencies
Oh,
replacing that. How crazy was
dude.
that? And then also,
You want to
as we're doing,
get me riled up is that whole Bitcoin is undermining fiat and government currencies. I'm sorry. No, it's not. Like, Bitcoin exists completely outside of that purview of all of those systems. Bitcoin's just doing its own thing. Like, I tweeted it today. Bitcoin is outside of the governments. Like, it is literally, it block by block, it protects its flock. Like, that's all it cares about. You guys with the fiat currencies, you're fucking it up. You're screwing it up. Like, that's all that's happening. Like, you guys are literally cannibalizing your own system. Bitcoin is not doing anything with regards to that. And now Hillary, like you said, came out and she's just like, oh, it's undermining our capability to maintain hegemony. It's like, well, no, you guys in the Federal Reserve are doing that. You're doing it fantastically well, by the way. Please continue, because like Bitcoin's just going to continue to chug along, and we're going to, it's like the way I like to describe it is like Bitcoin's like that monk, that warrior monk, that all the warrior monk does is just evade. and maybe, block, while like his aggressor is just constantly just wasting his energy trying to land a hit on him. And this monk is just constantly just like, swiping away like swings and kicks, and then the warrior ends up getting exhausted, beating himself up literally trying to fight this monk, and then Bitcoin's just like, all right, man, like my Captain America, I can do this all day, like keep
It's
coming at me, good luck.
it's crazy how it can transform, and that's what kind of got me even more bullish about Bitcoin when I learned about that. It's just the problem itself is simple, and we just needed sound money. We needed a sound money in the digital realm. That's the problem. And then Bitcoin is a complex solution to the simple problem, And it's like what they do with this fiat currency nonsense is they just basically have not created a closed loop system. It's impossible. It's impossible for them to have a deflationary world with fiat. Fiat has never worked ever. It's just never worked. And for her to argue recently, where she goes out to the economic forum and be like, yeah, well, it's gonna destabilize the countries and stuff. It's like you have. You mean like you guys have? That's what. That's what it's gonna do. Okay, interesting.
For like 2 points for any of your viewers that like haven't read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, especially the new version that came out, where it like doubled the size of the book. For any of your viewers that haven't read it, you guys need to go read it, especially the new one, because the U.S. and now China learned from the U.S. Like, we've been in the business of destabilizing countries, specifically third world countries, for like 50 years. Like, that's where I don't want to say the majority, because I'm probably speaking like beyond hyperbole at that point, but that's where a large amount of the US's like revenue has come from, like placing these countries into debt, making it so that they can't actually like pay back on that debt. So we gain ownership of their assets and their land. Like that, like it's once I finished that book, I was like, holy crap. Like, we really that's not even touching on the petrodollar and the military like movements that we've had. And you come out of the other side of that book and you're like, we really are the global bad guys. But one thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned was the fact that Bitcoin is a simple answer to a complex problem. That like you want to provide a decent parallel to fitness. That's it right there. Most people they overthink all the like solutions. Like, oh, a complex problem has to have a complex solution. No, like most of the time the solution is simple. Where it's difficult is actually like following through and executing. That's the hard part. Like for Bitcoin, the hard part, the simple solution is just buy and hold. The hard part is holding. That's the really hard part.
Leveraging, not leveraging. That's a crutch. You've seen people just dropping off of Twitter all of a sudden because they're listening to Plan B's, thing like, oh, it's going to get to this level by this time. They're like, okay, so now I'm going to buy call options. It's going to end at this direct, and then all of a sudden they're just smashed from their leverage. And so they were Bitcoin bulls, but they just leveraged themselves and smashed themselves. I see that
we saw that just recently where we touched 69,000.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw that somebody, I think it was on BitMEX, put up like a 30,000 Bitcoin long. 30,000 Bitcoin long, and they got wiped.
Oh.
And on top, man. I don't know if you follow the bots on Twitter, but I follow one of the bots that like shares like the liquidations. A couple weeks ago, somebody got liquidated twice, longing Litecoin with over $1 billion. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, stop. It's a
put it in cold storage. Storage.
It's a simple solution to a complex problem. Just buy it and hold it. That's it.
Yep.
Like, just stop. Like, just like with fitness, just like get out there, work out, like push your limit, eat well, sleep well, drink water. That's it. That's all you got to do. Like, you don't got to take all these supplements. You don't got to like athletic greens. You don't have to get like super fancy with all this stuff. Just work out hard, eat hard, sleep hard, drink water hard. That's it. That's all you got to do.
It's so true. The one part that I have a problem with, and I couldn't agree more about water. Water is we're 80% talking water blobs. I was just talking about this with a friend of mine,
Yeah.
and like this friend of mine, I was trying to get her to drink more water, and so I'm like, look, here's a bottle that's about the right size of what you need to drink a day. Drink this per day, and she looked at it and she's like, that's a lot, and I'm like, no, yeah, it is. Yeah, like that's what you're supposed to drink a day. People always say, oh, 8 glasses, this many. It's like, no, you're supposed to drink about a gallon. Like you drink that,
At
and so.
least.
Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, when I really am working out hard, I can sometimes get two full gallons a day, and it's like but also the quality of your water. A lot of people are just drinking, whatever Crystal Geyser or whatever plastic bottle water, and people don't know there's like microplastic particles in there and crap that can get stuck
And
in your
phthalates.
pores. And yeah, I notice immediately, like when I'm drinking pure water, I know that my body, I feel it like suck into my veins. Like right when I drink, if it's room temperature, that's the other thing. If it's cold water shocks your system. So people think, oh, I should have a glass of water before I go to bed. You do that, you shock your system, and you're not going to get that good of sleep because your body's trying to figure out what to do with this cold liquid inside of you. You're supposed to have room
Most of
temperature.
in reality, it has to sit in your stomach until it gets to body temperature before the body can use it.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
you you want to talk like go to an extreme like ice cream. You want to know why it feels like there's a brick in your stomach? Because there's literally a brick in your stomach. Like it's sitting there until it melts, and then until it gets up to 98.6 degrees, Fahrenheit, and then your body can finally use it. It's there's just a lot of like lack of understanding out there in the world. Like you can talk about Bitcoin, you talk about fitness. So like one thing I was going to bring up with your friend, one thing that I make a point to discuss with women in particular, because I'm the manager of a women's fitness studio here in Iowa, and they a lot of times one of my clients or even like a whole classroom will like bring up like hydration, and there's one kind of staple across most women that I've ever talked with across my life, whether they're a client or a friend or whatever. Um, a lot of women have an issue with being anemic to where their iron is low. So I have a theory around that because so when we're in a dehydrated state, especially chronically, when we're in a dehydrated state, our blood volume is like suboptimal. And so when your blood volume is suboptimal, that means that the ratios of everything else are also either suboptimal or way too high. So um, when your blood volume's low, particularly, um, blood glucose is going to be higher. So your body is going to be react. It can kick off an insulin response, thinking that you just ate something super sugary. And if if you're in a chronic state like that, which most people are dehydrated all day, every day. Your body reacts like you're constantly eating sugary foods to the point of where it increases insulin resistance. But back to the anemic point. So my theory now, again, I only have an undergraduate degree in exercise science, so I'm likely missing something here.
So you
But
know a
my
lot though. If you only have if you're not an MBA nowadays, it's like now you know more because you're sitting on your computer learning the real information, not the stuff in the textbooks. So you
yeah, that's
probably are
fair.
more well. It's probably more well informed, Mike. To be honest with you,
Hey, I'm
sorry
not
out there to anybody
indoctrinated.
that thinks otherwise, but it's like there's so much information that's for free. It's crazy. But anyway, keep going. I'm sorry. Just
So
I
so
think you're more informed now.
So when we consider our body's reaction to low blood volume because of dehydration, um, so one of the really important parts about general just like health and nutrient delivery is hemoglobin. Um, so hemoglobin is red blood cells, and that's how our body transports a lot of our nutrients, particularly oxygen. And this is where the hydration, like when we talk about hydration, like you'll be able to think better, your moods will be better. That's going to be largely because of the oxygen delivery system being able to operate at like closer to optimal capacity because you're actually finally hydrated. Um, I have a theory that when you're dehydrated and your blood volume is screwed up, that means that your iron saturation on hemoglobin is therefore also suboptimal because the way that hemoglobin transports oxygen molecules is that the oxygen binds to the iron on the hemoglobin. So when we consider that like a woman who is dehydrated chronically is also the hemoglobin iron saturation is low, which like is not only like her moods and her like maybe her cognition are affected, but the iron itself is also likely going to be affecting her menstrual cycle. But that also is going to be affecting if she's working out. The quality of her blood, like there's going to be lower iron, so like it's gonna and like
All
the
based
whole
off hydration. Like this is a
yeah.
high. Wow. Wow.
So like when you consider that too, because this goes back to men too, because with the iron and the oxygen delivery system, if this kind of relationship really is happening, then it's also going to be affecting like your physical capacity for working out, because when your iron is lower than it should be, your hemoglobin therefore isn't delivering as much oxygen as it should. So then if you're working out, you're not capable of exerting as much force as you should be, because you're not capable of delivering as much oxygen to your muscles. So I mean that's just kind of like a long rabbit hole kind of deal, but and obviously along the whole way there's lots of other systems that are going to be feeding in and everything. But yeah, like I discuss that with as many people as I can. The particularly the type 2 diabetes, with chronic dehydration. It's just like Bitcoin, it's all about positive feedback loops. So when it comes to like if you're an individual who can make sure that you're getting hydrated like just optimally, which I would argue should be about 1.5 to 2 gallons a day, like particularly 1.5. 2 gallons is like if you're like a psychopath like me and you work out every day. um
You gotta
but
start early with that. You like it's like first thing you wake up. That's the one thing I
yep,
gotta get on is like I at least do it now where I put a bottle right next to my bed of water, like so I wake up in the morning and I drink right away. And but
yep.
the one thing I'm trying to get out is coffee. I like coffee too much and caffeine. I know it
Oh, I
dehydrates
love
me.
coffee.
It's hard for me to get rid of it. You know, I'm trying to get like on the
It's
matcha green teas, which is still
to
caffeine, but it's
be
just not the same as coffee. I think.
to be fair on yourself though, it's better than Red Bull or Monster, because
Yeah.
you're not getting that absolute like nuclear bomb of dehydrating like compounds. Like, and at the same time, like if you're drinking coffee, like the more I was about to say the more closelier, because it's a word that was used in South Park as one of my
It works
favorite
for
episodes.
me. It works for me, man. Hey, a
The
close.
more
I wouldn't have questioned it. I would have kept going. You know,
as
I'm
an
a
aside,
dropout, man. I didn't even get the AA degree. I dropped out with 58 units done. Literally 58
hey,
units. I had 2 units left, and I still was like, nah, I'm not gonna. I'm out of here. And I just like didn't finish
I
it.
think I graduated with enough credits to technically I could have gotten 2 bachelors. But the episode of South Park that I'm referring to is it's an episode where they're making fun of the Da Vinci Code, and when he's like in the movie Da Vinci Code, he's analyzing like the painting of the Last Supper. He says look closer, and then in South Park he's like no, look closelier. So I love that word. But
I know exactly that. I know. It brought back my childhood right there, man.
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
But when we look closelier at like just these systems, like particularly with like dehydration and coffee, the closelier you get to using more natural like coffee grounds, like even if to the point where you're the one grinding them up, you're still getting a lot of healthy like oils and fats out of it. So like you got to at least be fair to yourself on that point.
Yeah, that bulletproof stuff works pretty well. That will actually get me if I do it right. Like, 'cause if you get like a metal blender and you blend the bulletproof like the fats into your coffee. I don't know if you have the bulletproof coffee thing, but that's like it's
I've
like
heard about it. It
dude,
looks
it's rocket
delicious.
fuel. This stuff is rocket fuel, man. You take that in the morning, like, oh, dude, I used to do a drip. Like, I used to drip my coffee overnight and then do the whole blender. I was all about it. Like back when I lived in the warehouse, I had like this certain system that I used, and I haven't done it in a while. Now I'm just spoiled with this Nespresso machine. I just am
I'm
like
glad I'm glad
Nespresso.
you brought up that bulletproof coffee, because it has fats in it, right?
Yep.
So this is how like this particular conversation we can have around what's going on with society and diet. Because like we talked about it in that spaces but before this, where there's a dynamic that's playing out right now. Like throwing out all of the different like theory and history around like, food processing and manipulation and like, bread enrichment and all that stuff. Um, so back like let's like we could even go back to like the American Dream thing back in the 50s. The majority, a lot of the workforce was labor intensive in some manner, whether you're standing on your feet all day or whatever. It was labor intensive in some way. And a large portion, and like back then, there like a lot of the diet was carb heavy. Um, so that made sense because they're not the most efficient energy system in the body, but it's the most rapidly um it's the most the body can utilize and digest carbohydrates faster. It's just not as efficient. So it made sense back then. Like more labor intensive, more carbs in the diet, it balances out. But now I think we could argue that the majority of the workforce is not labor intensive. Like we're sitting at desks having Zoom calls like we are and just talking to each other. Um, that's where like the diet, like the standard diet doesn't match up with the standard labor style. So what should be happening is that like carbohydrates are less efficient, but they're more readily like uptakeable or readily like kind of like I can't think of the right word right now, but like carbohydrates can be utilized faster. They can be utilized faster. It's less efficient. Fats are way more efficient, but it takes a long time for the body to get all of the efficiency out of it. Like I going back to my college days with like carbohydrates, I think you get maybe you expend like X amount of ATP in order to digest the carbohydrate, and you get like an excess of like two more than what you spent into it. So it's wildly inefficient. But then using the oxidative system, which is the fat digestion system, um I can't remember the ratio, but it is like it's wildly more like as far as an investment thesis, like you would want to use fats. But we've got a imbalance right now where more people are eating very carb heavy diets, but they're not doing anything in their daily routine. So then the body, like our body, like for individual like clients that I have, like whether it's training or just coming into the gym, um individuals that are overweight and they come in and ask questions. Like one thing I've been one kind of approach I've been using to ease some of the stress that these people are having is that you're overweight. That means that your body is very efficient at energy storage. That's basically all that means. Now, we can disregard like any sort of like the toxins and all sorts of that stuff because there's a lot of nuance to that. But what that means is what I've been telling a lot of people is that if you want to start to fix that, because there's a lot of people out there that are at least overweight, if not obese. I think the study that I cited in one of my articles was by the National Institute of Health that said at the current pace by 2030, 78% of Americans are going to be at minimum obese, if not more morbidly obese. Um, yeah,
Scary.
but so one thing that I've been trying to kind of champion to a lot of these people is that so one of the disconnects, one of the many disagreements I had in college and with like a lot of the trainers that were my coworkers was that one of the responses to individuals that are overweight right now is to like be doing like high repetition work, like high reps, high cardio and all that stuff. I disagree. I think that if you're an individual that's trying to lose weight, particularly adipose tissue, because I don't like the term losing weight because that's it's just a misnomer. Because like when you pack on muscle, you're gonna gain weight. It's just not bad weight. Um, one thing I tell people that are overweight that are trying to lose adipose tissue or fat weight is that if you want to actually find a long-term solution to what is a long-term problem, it's simple. Just like we were talking about, it's a complex problem with a simple solution. Grow muscle. You just grow muscle. Grow muscle, increase the body's caloric demand, and then your body will just start to eat away at the fat stores. Because, and then that's also where I don't like the whole theory of like calorie deficiency. I don't like that either. You should at least be meeting the minimum requirements for calories. and that kind of like starts to set up a feedback loop for losing weight, where you're doing the work, you're training with a trainer to perform the workouts to grow muscle mass, and then you meet the caloric minimums for your body, but you're increasing the amount of protein that you're taking in, and you're meeting the minimum amount of carbs because your brain draws 30% of your caloric demand is just from brain activity. So and your brain prefers carbohydrates, which makes sense because if you're thinking and you're signaling to your muscles and all that stuff, you want that quick uptake nutrient source. So one of the things that this is what I tell individuals that are overweight is like, get in there, get into the gym, start growing muscle, meet your caloric minimum, meet your carbohydrate minimum, get more protein, grow the muscle, increase the body's caloric demand on a constant basis. Because it's kind of like, I equate it to with Bitcoin, like stacking sats, like DCA stacking sats, particularly. Like when you're working on growing muscle and you're meeting your nutrient like minimums, and you're drinking enough water and you're sleeping enough to the point where your body is growing muscle mass, then your body starts to increase the amount of caloric demand every day. Then it'll start to eat away at the fat tissue to the point of where you're just constantly improving even while you're sleeping. And it's just like Bitcoin DCA. Like, as long as you're DCAing, Bitcoin's going to keep chugging along. It's going to keep appreciating in value. Just keep stacking every day or every week or whatever you have it set up, and you're going to be good. Like over the long run, it's simple. It's just difficult because it's boring. It's not flashy.
Yeah. I want to talk about sleep because that's actually, of all the subjects, the one that I have a problem with is sleep. And I recently, I watched I took like a master class on it too, like from that master class thing. This guy was on Joe Rogan, this like sleep doctor guy, and he was talking about all these different ways.
Andrew Huberman?
It might be like the guy looks like he gets a lot of sleep. The guy, I'll tell you, he looks like, I mean, you look at this guy, you go, this guy, he sleeps well. I could tell this guy, but he's got kind of like a reddish hair sort of thing, blue eyes.
Okay, that's not Andrew then.
He was on Joe Rogan, and if you look at like Sleep Doctor Joe Rogan, I don't know why his name's not going. And he also has a master class on it, and he talked about if you drink. So we always hear that saying, a nightcap, and so I always, when I drink, a little bit of whiskey or a little tequila or something like that before I went to bed. And I realized, wait a minute, once he told me this, it blew my mind, but you can't go into REM sleep if you drink within 8 hours of trying to go to bed. You won't go into REM. Your REM, and that's the most valuable cycle that you can possibly, that's like the most valuable thing in healing your body, period, is your REM cycle sleep. And so if you smoke marijuana, you drink, you take caffeine, any stimulant before you go to bed, you will not enter your REM cycle. It's like not even a partial. You just won't enter your REM cycle. And so people wonder why they're so tired every day. It's because that's like 95% of people. Like 95% of people drink a beer before they go to bed, or they, have coffee too late at dinner time, or they, or they're one of the, the weed smokers or whatever it is. It's like they're all, that's a normal thing in today's society to do that at nighttime. But the funny thing is, if you're going to be doing that, you should be drinking in the morning, because it's like you have the 8-hour shelf life of it, or half-life or whatever. And so it's like, when I heard that for the first time, it blew my mind. But actually, I'm really excited for next week because I finally bought a sauna, one of those low EMF saunas. Because I was researching how, because I remember when the gyms were open, now they're not open, but when I lived in the warehouse, I used to have to go to the gym to take a shower. And so like I was wondering, like, why am I not as productive as I used to be? And I had a schedule. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. I'd go to the gym. Gym would open at 4:30. I'd go sit in the sauna for 45 minutes. I'd sit there, get all warmed up, and then I'd say a long time, and like 45 minutes was my usual. Like I would always get up to 40. It took me a while. It'd normally be like 30, and then I got to 45. Sometimes I was able to get to like an hour, but I'd have to go in there with like a gallon of water with me, so I'd cheat a little bit. And so that was my thing, but I'd sweat out so much toxins and so much stuff in the sauna, and then I'd go work out afterwards, and then I'd go back in the sauna, and then I'd take a cold shower, and then I'd start my day at like 8 o'clock. I'd be at the gym for like 4 hours, like I just have this really long regimen every day. But when I came back I was just on it, man. Like it was like I drank 10 Red Bulls. I was just on it. And I was wondering like what, and also I slept really well. And I'm like, you mean to tell me I live in this fancy new place, and I used to live on in a couch in my warehouse, and I slept better on the couch than I do at this
Yep.
fancy new place. And I'm like, I'm comfortable, or something's going wrong here, because I miss the old me where I used to have this kind of schedule going on. And so I finally went, you know what? I'm starting to. I've shared some pictures of the gym that I built here, and I literally I think my gym is now more expensive than my car at this point. I'm pretty like that. If that's
Hey,
not
I'm
based,
okay
I don't know
with
what. So like, I found out that there's selling saunas in Costco. I'm like, oh, dude, that's perfect. I'll have them just deliver one. And so I bought a sauna, and it's like this low EMF sauna thing where, like, I guess it pierces deeper into your tissues or whatever. But I guess if you sweat a lot, it helps your sleep. Like the hot and cold helps your sleep for somehow, some way. So I don't know if that's going to be a big deal, but the sleep thing is where I lack. Do you have like any advice on how to actually get yourself to bed? You know, I mean, like, part of me thinks like, throw
Yes.
your cell phone, get your cell phone. Don't have your cell phone charger near your bed. You know, put your cell phone in the closet or something. Like, get it away from you. Get a different
Yeah.
alarm clock than your cell phone. I think is a big deal, because we shock ourselves with this bright light every single. I mean, I'm guilty of it. Sometimes I'll be up at 1 a.m. with you guys. We're all talking these Twitter spaces, and we're just blasting this bright light on our face, wondering why we didn't get any sleep, and we're all tired. And it's like, it's so obvious. But sorry, I didn't mean to go on a little rant there. But it's like, that's something that I'm trying to figure out right myself. I want to get to my 8 hours of good sleep with REM cycle sleep, so I can just get my scheduling back on track. You know, like,
Yeah.
what do you think is like a good tip to
Well,
get
this
there?
this is like fantastic because two 2 days ago or yesterday, I can't remember. I don't have any track of time anymore. My own mom actually came over to my place, and we had like a therapy session. Like, she was asking me for tips and stuff because I wake up at 3:45 in the morning every day. Um, Now, I also don't have a social life, so I'm capable of going to bed at like 7:38 without any remorse whatsoever. Um, and I also live alone, and I'm not in a relationship, so I have like all this freedom of time where I can just do whatever I
That
want.
makes two of us. Look
Yeah.
at that.
But so like with like getting to sleep, so kind of like my daily routine, I wake up at 3:45 in the morning. I'm still one of those people that I use my phone as my alarm. Um, but I make sure not to like I don't touch my phone, like, because like, so like I'm one of those people, like, I don't know about you, but I cannot sleep all the way through a night. I always wake up. If I don't wake up, it's usually because I'm sick. Like, that's where I'm like hitting like really, really, really deep sleep. Um, so I wake up at least once or twice throughout the night. I make sure to like have an active, like, I don't touch my phone. I don't like look to see what time it is or anything. Like, I'll wake up when my alarm goes off. That's when I need to wake up. Um, but my alarm goes off at 3:45. I get up, and like, that's where like and that part of the reason why I still use my phone is like that jolting light that you're talking about helps wake me up. Um, because and then like for your listeners that don't know this, the reasoning that that blue light wakes you up is because your retinal nerve and your eyeballs, like, they're not an attachment to your brain. Like, your retinal nerve is your brain. Like, it's a direct like extension of your brain. That's why it wakes us up like so effectively. And then like on top of that, like, naturally circadian rhythm is like the light hits your retinal nerve and it's like, oh, the sun's up, it's time to wake up. Um, but so like I wake up at 3:45. I get like I like to do that so I can get into the gym early, like we were talking about. And then at the same time, I also like to get up that early and get started with my day because part of that circadian rhythm is like as the sun's rising, your body naturally is just like waking up. So if you get up early before the sun's up, you start getting your stuff done, you start banging out your day. And then as the sun's like getting up into the sky and like maybe you're done by like 11 or noon and you're done with the day, you still have plenty of energy for the rest of the day because your body's naturally still kicking because the sun's out. And then on top of that, like you were talking about with caffeine and like taking it in the morning or alcohol or cannabis or whatever, particularly caffeine, uh, it's not so much the caffeine that keeps us up at night, it's adenosine. And that adenosine tends to stay within our system for about somewhere between 5 to 8 hours. So if you're trying to get to bed like at 8 o'clock, you probably should have stopped taking caffeine probably around lunch, in my opinion. But at the same time, so like my daily routine is like I wake up, work out, um, Now, because of my because I manage a gym, my workouts aren't always at the same time like I would like to. So sometimes I work out at 4 a.m. Sometimes I have to work out at 9 or 11. It depends on the day. Um, but I get my caffeine intake done by noon, and then at that point I don't know about you, but I intermittent fast every day. So I don't eat until at least after 1 o'clock, or as close to 1 o'clock as I can get. And then I'll eat at 1, and then I'll eat at like 3 or 4, and then I'll eat my last meal at like 6 or 7 o'clock. And then I'm usually in bed and out by 7:30, 8 p.m.
Impressive.
And yeah, and then because
Yeah.
like when we're doing that, my caffeine intake, like I said, is done before noon. So by the time it comes around to like time for me to pass out, I'm ready to go. And then I also, like, one thing that's a huge benefit is I don't have my like a TV in my bedroom. That's a big one for a lot of people. Like it allows you to just separate from even like the tendency or the desire to like fall asleep with the TV on. That's gonna screw up so much stuff for you. Like, just like, I recommend everybody get any sort of screen aside from like maybe your phone, like, that you need, out of your room or where you're sleeping. And then but at the same time, like, I've created this positive feedback loop for like my daily routine. It's like this whole process, like the intermittent fasting, I'm also working out in a fasted state. And one of the reasons for that is that when you intermittent fast, um your body goes into kind of like a consistent, almost like borderline starved state. And the reason this is so beneficial, particularly for men, is that when you get to that point, when you get into a fasted state, there's a book here. I got it right here. There's a book called The Source by Tara Swart, which I recommend to everybody. It gets a little self helpy, so like I'm not a fan of self help books because like they get a little preachy. But she's got a lot of really good science in there, particularly because she's a neuroscientist or neurobiologist. And when you're in a fasted state, your body increases neurogenesis, which is growing new neurons. Your body increases neuroplasticity, which means that your nervous system, your brain, and your spinal cord are a little more flexible in how they can reorient and bundle neurons for more efficient neural signaling, which is extremely important. Which, like, as an example, like bundling would be like if you do a repetitive movement over and over and over and over, your nervous system bundles those neurons together because like you're using the same pathways over and over and over. So when it bundles them, like the signaling just becomes more efficient. It's the one way I described it was to a recent friend of mine was, it's like when you use like a main roadway to get to multiple different locations in a city. Like, that's essentially what bundling is like. Um, and so when you're in a fasted state, neurogenesis is up, you're growing more neurons, neuroplasticity is up, so like you're capable of learning and bundling better and faster. But particularly for men, your testosterone goes up. And that makes sense because like if you go all the way back to like throughout like human history, as far as Homo sapiens go, all the way back to our ancestors that are like nomads and fighting for meals every day, if you're starving, you want to be able to get smarter faster. You want to be able to learn faster. You want to like, you need that testosterone to get like pissed off so you can go find a meal or, survive if you have an aggressor. So that all makes sense. And then when you work out in a fasted state, like, it just jacks up those responses even more. So you can really start to leverage your everyday routine to create a positive feedback loop to like, because at that point you're not only getting stronger and you're growing more muscle, but you're learning faster and you're learning better. Like, tell me where there's a negative in that
It's a
besides not
big
having
deal.
a social life.
It's funny, like it's just all extremely simple things that you're dropping here, but they're gems. And so many people they just, and I was talking about this with one of my friends as well. It's like so many times in business or whatever it is, like people will work that job where they're making X amount of dollars, and they literally will sell their car or something to save money on something else, but they didn't realize they sold that car for $3,000 less than they could have sold it. They just didn't do the research, and somebody else made that $3,000 real quick off flipping the car off of them. Or they'll like walk by and like there's so many things, like some of my biggest business deals were just spoon fed to me. Just literally like, hey, did this work for you? Yeah, that works for me. Thank you. And it was just like, okay, like, wow, okay, 10 grand. Thank you. Like, have a good one. Like, it was like, there was things like that happened so many times where it just is like, these things were just overlooked and just spoon fed. And so it's like when it comes to some of these things, it's like simplicity really is the key to brilliance. And with health, like the best piece of advice that I could give or you could give, it just is that's it. It's just simple. And when you talked about like, when you brought up noon, that's a big deal, I think, to stop drinking caffeine, because I'm already I probably will already failed at that today. You know, so it's like that's a big one for me, is just not have caffeine past noon, because I do want to get to bed ideally at 7 or 8, and I do drink caffeine too late in the day. So there's my problem. It's a simple problem, and you've nailed it. And then say some people want to work out at night, they take pre-workout. You know. Oh, you just ruined it all. You just ruined it right there. You know, how many people go to the gym after they get off work at 5 o'clock and take a scoop of No Explode or whatever, you know? Yeah. How many? Like all these guys are doing this. And so there's what this might be like a total catastrophe going on right now that nobody even notices, that we're not entering REM sleep. So we're just a bunch of docile lambs out there that just haven't slept well. You know, and it's like, isn't it crazy? It could be something that simple, that minute. Hydration, lack of sleep, like those two things.
The hydration is going to be affecting sleep too, because if you're dehydrated, you're as likely that your heart rate is jacked up because your blood volume is low, because your heart has to work harder to move the diminished amount of blood to instill the same effects of delivering the proper amount of nutrients. You're like, when your blood volume's low, your heart's just going to have to beat faster to get the same amount of volume circulating through your body, so it can deliver all those nutrients and that oxygen in the water. It's like you start looking at all this stuff, and you start realizing how you can set up positive feedback loops, and they all just like push you forward. So the hard part is just learning to say no. That's the hard part, especially to your friends that aren't interested in this stuff. They're just like, hey, let's go out for a drink. It's like, no, I want to be able to get up, like, you know, at X amount of time in the morning. It's like, well, were you a loser? It's like, no, I just care about my body and my mind more.
No, they are, you know, and I could tell when I talked with you on these Twitter spaces and stuff, I'm like, Mike's a cool cat, man. Cause I could tell that you're introverted, and there's only so many people that are true introverts. People want to say like they're introverted. You can be, some of us, you know, we can be both, you know, we can be extroverted, introverted at the same, but we want to be introverted. Like it's like that. It's our desire to be alone reading a book, you know?
The funny thing is, like, if you wanted my backstory, that'd be a whole other podcast entirely, because I actually grew up as a kid, I was extroverted. I didn't really develop the introverted qualities until there's a specific life event that happened when I was in elementary school. But yeah, I'm one of those people that I can code switch like that. I can go between introverted and extroverted, but I really enjoy my time alone. Like I can go out, with my friends to a bar, but like, especially now after like being deployed and everything, like large groups just kind of like stress me out. And none of that has to do with any sort of combat experience. It's just, I just like, they just look like soft targets, and I just don't want to be there. But anyway, like, I can be extroverted, but like you were saying, it's like I like it drains me being around a lot of people all the time, or even around, like, hanging around one person for any extended period of time. It's like, I need to reset, like I need to recharge my batteries, and the only way I can do that is by being alone.
Yep. It's almost painful, you know. Like I had that realization recently where I'd been dating a little bit and getting out, and it's like I love doing it. I love, you know, getting out there, you know,
I love meeting new people.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like after a while, and say in this specific situation, it did work out. Like things were going well, but the problem is like it's time. It takes time, and then you also get comfortable, and you get like, oh, I just want to lay in bed now. You know, I just want to sit at home now. Let's just drink coffee and sit around and do nothing. And so like I noticed with this person, I was thinking, and she was thinking this too. It's like, man, I'm not getting anything done today. Why? What is this? Well, you're not getting anything done. I'm not getting
Because you
anything done.
enjoy just being around each other. And
Exactly.
there's nothing particularly wrong with that
But that's
unless you're
not
not
effective. You know,
comfortable with it. If you're not happy with like not doing something, like by all means, like I definitely take days where it's just like, I'm not doing shit today. I'm not doing
yep.
anything. And that's another thing that a lot of people need to get comfortable with is like, yeah, you can be a hustler and a grinder, but you still need to recharge.
I think that's what happened with me, where I was just like, it was like it's almost like a drug, where it's like, oh, I can decompress now. I'm just gonna lay around and do nothing today. But it's like, the problem is it's not who I am. So it's like what's painful, and this is why I have the Nikola Tesla photo behind me, because I'm a big fan of his. And he basically talked about how he said, be alone. That's where the ideas come. Be alone, and it's like the painful part of being an entrepreneur or being somebody dedicated to their craft, and any craft or whatever it might be, is that being truly effective often comes in dark isolation. Yep. It's like, and so it's like, that's the painful thing. And I'm realizing like, so if I was dating, I'll say I was dating this individual, right? I'm going out and I'm like, I'm not getting videos done. I don't have ideas hitting my brain that I would write down for the next idea. I'm not taking notes on what the Fed's doing. I'm not taking notes on what just happened recently with this next thing. And I'm not in that zone, so to speak. I'm thinking about somebody else. So my emotions are haywire and my time is taken away. And even though I want it, I want to be there really bad. I'm losing my time and my emotions are off of where they normally would be. And so it's such a painful thing, realizing that it's like, when you realize how effective you are in isolation, it makes me like, I don't know if I want a relationship. It's like, it's hard for me to imagine giving up that now. I want it, but I also don't want it.
Like what you enjoy doing, like your passions are therapeutic, because it's not just doing what you want. It's an interesting dynamic, because it's very much like what writing has become for me, because it allows me to put my thoughts down and organize myself in a way of where, like, when you don't take that time to really get your passions out and like to like affect them into like reality, whether it's writing, or whether it's doing a podcast, or whether it's maybe you're trying to learn how to become a carpenter, or like just wood crafting in general, because like any of that it's a very interesting human dynamic of like, if you're not capable of expressing your passions, it's kind of like your soul starts to rot a little bit.
So true, man. So true.
And I don't really know how other way to describe it, because, and this goes back to like what we were talking about with like Bitcoin and society and all that, and like the individual being capable of taking risks and everything. Not many people know who they are today, and I think a lot of that goes back to like the fiat dollar economy system causing people to get stuck on this hamster wheel, to where they don't really find out who they are, to where they're creating false images of themselves, to the point of where, because they're creating false images of themselves, they're also creating false dreams for themselves. Like, how many people, or like, for example, dating, how many girls have you gone on dates with that give you some cliche cookie cutter crap dream that they have? It's like, that's not an original thought. Like, that's not.
I've gotten up and just left 150 on the counter and be like, it's not going to work out. Have a good night. It's just so annoying, dude. It's the worst.
And like, it goes so much deeper, because not only are they using their it's like a copy pasta dream for themselves, because they haven't learned who they are. So like, they're projecting a false dream or a false narrative to you, to try and create a false relationship, to create a false family, to create a false future. It's like, no, that's all fiat, dude. I'm not interested in that.
Yep. And the other thing too is like, and I find myself slipping with this, as well as with the social media thing. On what people need to understand is, on social media, we are portraying what we want other people to see in us. We're not portraying the truth. You might see, somebody wearing a fancy watch, but you don't see them flipping it behind the scenes and selling it the next day. You might see somebody, and that's something that's very, very common in my industry in collectibles, is flexing inventory. I'm guilty of it.
What was the Adam Sandler movie? Is it Uncut Gems?
Yep.
Where he would put one on loan, get another one, go talk to somebody else, come back.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude. You should see the I have stories that would blow your mind on the collectibles game. Like one of these days, people told me like you gotta talk about it. But I mean, I would have to write a book or something on all the crazy stories in collectibles and like leveraging and like, dude, there's some gnarly things that happened where it was like some things would happen where it would be like pay on delivery if you're if you knew the person. So it'd be like sometimes there's one time I got floated to me like 50 grand worth of inventory and didn't have $1 in the account at the time. And I was just dead broke, and they had it coming. I had to pay it by the time it got to me, so I had like 5 days to pay it, And so I sold it before it landed, and I got the wire in right at the right time, and then wired.
That's a dangerous game, dude.
Oh, that was like when I was like 24 or 23, so it was a little while ago. But that was like when I first made my like a big payday. It was like a first big chunk, and it was money off of nothing, from thin air, and so like things like that would happen. So it's like one of these days I'll talk about all these crazy flipping stories and stuff, and like when I was bouncing
you should at least write them down while they're fresh in your mind so that you can use it for a book later, because you'll probably forget about them.
Some of them are so crazy that I don't know if I could. Like but you're right. Like at least like bullet point them and like that's my one thing is like pen and pad in every single room is one of my life hacks because I have ADD like to the max. So yeah. I have to have like I bought on Amazon like I bought like a bajillion white notepads, just the regular office print white notepads, and I just put them in every room. Dude, you need to do that. Like when we get off the podcast, like order it. Like a girl I was talking about, I literally gave her one and a pen and pad and I bought a water. I'm like, these are the things that could change your life. These little things here, I want to help you.
And then she's like, okay, you're weird. I'm not coming back.
Pretty much. I think what it is like a mutual realization in a way that like, if you want to be productive, that's why I think we're having less kids. Because we all want to be so productive that it's like, do I want to burden myself with a relationship regardless if the relationship is good? The relationship it could be amazing. You could really get along, could be really attracted to each other. There's no problems at all anywhere. But the problem is your time, giving up your time and your energy.
That's the problem with our fiat economy is that like having a kid, if you're not financially secure, or like at least financially secure, or even financially independent, having a kid is basically a death sentence right now. Like,
I love your article on that. You talked about that in your article back on August 31st, right? The Bitcoin Revives the American Dream. You had brought that up a little bit in that article, and that was a really good one. You had sent that to me a little while back on Twitter, and I kind of skimmed through it before we started the podcast. And a lot of people need to read that. A lot of people need to read your work on that because it's like it really makes you understand how big of a deal it is that it's damaging our lives. The fact that our money's just being dwindled away from us. It's killing us.
And one thing that like specifically the politicians, like there was an article that I can't remember what the outlet was, but it virtue signaled claiming that a woman who wants to be a mother is a bad person, ignoring all of the biological like necessities of like how important it is that a woman is capable of having a kid.
It's strange times.
When we look at societal demographics, like demographics drive everything. When we're not at least having as many kids as there are like adults in the population, if we're not maintaining a 1-to-1 ratio, or at the and if we're not like growing, like the economy takes a massive hit, because once those newborns or those children become adults, there's less adults on the market than there was when they were born. There's less people buying on the market. And when there's less demand than there is supply, like values go down. This is a basic rule of economics, like supply and demand. And like Mark Yusko talks about this like ad nauseum. It's just, and Japan's kind of going through that, from my understanding, the last decade or so. It's like when there's less buyers in the market, everything starts to slide. And the only reason Japan hasn't like slid worse is because they've monetized all their debt. And that's what the US is doing right now. Like It's just
If
like,
you look at it from a third person perspective on what's going on, like if you just like just from an outside view and you saw what the Fed was doing and you saw our answers to these complex problems, you'd just be like, they're crazy. Like, what is wrong with
well, it's
these
like,
crazy chimps? Like these chimps are out of control. These chimps right here, they're out of control. They're
do
wild.
you hear Preston Pish's bit? I think it was with John Vallis on I can't remember the name of the podcast, but Preston Pish was like, if you were an alien, if there was an alien species and they looked at us right now and they saw what we were doing with like the bond market, he's like, this is the dumbest species on the planet. Like, this
What
doesn't
is
make
wrong with
sense.
these chimps, man? Like, what is wrong with them? Let's not visit them. Why would we come down and visit them? They'll probably try to shoot at us or something. Like, I don't want
Yeah,
to talk to these
not
people.
only can they not manage their own finances, but they're killing each other over some like a fabricated problem. Like,
It's just
no.
crazy, dude. It's crazy.
And that's the
And
beauty of the Bitcoin community. Is so many of us are so focused on just like logic and rationale and actually problem solving, and not fabricating a solution for a problem that hasn't been found yet.
absolutely. I've noticed that it's like this funnel. It's like they've gone down this funnel of how do I get to a solution? What is the solution to this problem? And then you get to, wow, Bitcoin actually is a viable solution here. Like, and then that's what,
Yeah.
then that core community there is now very interested in health. They're very interested in all these other spaces and trying to get to the
Education.
bottom of it. And it's like, and now you got guys like Jeff Booth out there, talking about deflation. I would love to get him on at some point. I got Greg Foss on, and I know that they're friends, so maybe at some point I can get him on to talk about deflation. But it's like it's that core group of people I'm noticing are extremely intelligent. And it sounds like patting, ourselves on the back a little bit. I don't want to be arrogant about it, but I mean, I recently approached the Bitcoin community because I'm from precious metals and from collectibles. And so I'm like, when I finally realized that, well, gold doesn't give the average individual leverage. It doesn't give these small countries leverage to actually have a fair monetary system because all these central banks already have gold. Gold is very hard to audit. There's so many, obviously, a million things on why I don't think gold is the same type of. It's almost like a weapon in the arsenal. It's like there isn't.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is a way different. It's like
It's definitely in the war chest. That's for
Apache helicopter compared to a knife. It's like it's not even close in for what the kind of power it gives to the individual at their fingertips.
It's like an Apache helicopter. It's like Bitcoin is the Apache helicopter. Gold is like a catapult from like Roman era.
It's true. When it comes to money, it's like, and it's like, it's hard for me to say that because a lot of people don't like that I say that, but the truth is I think it'll be a slow horse in the race. I don't know if gold will just tank because it's just been so established, but I think it'll probably be something that when it goes to 2,500, 3,000, Bitcoin's going to be a 250,000, 500K. Like it'll just be a slow horse in the race where Bitcoin just starts leaping. Now, Bitcoin is getting to a point where it's like law of large numbers, where it does get to a point where it's like, okay, well, it's 60,000 now, to double to get to 120,000, that's 100% gain. It's not a 200% gain like it was, going from 5,000 at the beginning of the pandemic until now, you have a very large percentage gain on your hands. But when you get to large numbers, when you get to, like you say, Plan B's estimate or whatever, it's like, okay, well, that's 100%. Like that's a one bagger, So could silver be a one bagger here from 24 to 48? Well, it did it in 2011 and it should be at all time highs right now based on how much it's being used. So I start thinking about those types of things. But in regards to like the wormhole of money that could go towards Bitcoin and what it does for the world, there's nothing close.
Unprecedented. Yeah.
There's nothing.
Absolutely unprecedented.
It's needed. Like I think it really is. And this might be why Michael Saylor went all in on it is, it's our only hope. There is no other hope. That's it.
And that's the thing is like with my friends or my peers or anybody that I've been approached to talk about like why Bitcoin. It's like any other like moment in history like this where there's a debt cycle, it has always resorted in either war or revolution or both because there's no other way to fix the system.
Yep.
But now there's this asset that is neutral towards everybody. No one country can like prevent another country from getting into it, which is funny because you look at like the geopolitics right now, and that's majority of what geopolitics is. It's like, well, we don't want that person being able to do what we can do just because we don't like them. It's like, well, Bitcoin doesn't care. well, we don't want we want to like be able to prevent them from getting into Bitcoin so we can profit from it. It's like, well, you can't, and you're gonna have to suck it up like an adult, stop being a child, and preventing them from having the toy that you want, even though you're not using it. Like, everybody can profit from it. Yeah, maybe your enemies can profit from it, but deal with it. Maybe find a way to work with them instead of working against each other all the time and wasting so much time and lives. Like, that's the big one. Wasting lives, wasting time, wasting resources on wasting those lives and that time. It's like going back to gold. Like, I imagine gold will be far more important once it gets demonetized and we can use it in large uses for space travel. Because I don't know if you followed a project that's going on, that's a startup where they're working on building an orbital manufacturing facility. And if they do succeed and they produce an orbital manufacturing facility where you can actually produce goods in the vacuum of space, where my mind goes is that we can produce then maybe a shipping port on the moon. And then that's what this is going to increase the demand for gold because of this. From my understanding is gold is very important as far as like space travel goes. And then you can produce a shipping lane on the moon, and then you can produce a manufacturing site down there. And then when you have manufacturing and shipping down there on the moon, then we can gain access to the helium-3 that is on the moon, which is a very important isotope for nuclear fusion. And then if we can tackle nuclear fusion, then there's free energy for you right there. That's the pathway that I see for the human species right now. But we have to get over all the childish crap that we're doing down on the ground right now of like, oh, like we don't like what Israel is doing, so we're going to do these tariffs even though they don't work. And if you've read Economics in One Lesson by was it Henry Hazlitt, or I can't remember his name. If you've read Economics in One Lesson, he talks about how tariffs and sanctions actually just feed back into the inflation negative feedback loop and cause prices to go higher. They don't actually accomplish anything besides making the people that are in that country really hate the other country that's putting the tariffs on theirs because they're making their life more difficult. Maybe we start using Bitcoin. Maybe we all start working together towards a couple common goals and common goods. Maybe we can stop completely destroying this planet. Maybe we can get to the moon and then Mars, start like actually colonizing the rest of the solar system, and maybe we can actually like cross that line from science fiction into reality. That's what I hope for.
Awesome. I love thinking, because if you think big, like some people might think it's crazy to think like that, but it's like that's the kind of thought that the world needs, because when you think big, you start coming up with big ideas, and big ideas often become realities at points. It's like if you're crazy enough to think it, it might just happen. And so
well,
it's
and that's the thing is like Bitcoin's like can solve so many of these inefficiencies and these issues to where you can have the freedom to actually think big, to think farther into the future, the plan for like a family, to the point of where you don't have to stress out about like taking out loans or going into debt to service it or whatever. Like with Bitcoin, we can possibly fix politics, fix the economy, fix education, fix industry, fix healthcare. Like, again, it's a simple solution to a complex problem. The hard part is just executing and also being patient to execute well. That's the other thing. It's like, it's not going to be a 5-year solution. It's not going to be a 10 year. It's probably going to be like a 20 or 50-year solution, but it's still a solution.
Isn't it just crazy that like humans find a way to adapt somehow, and it's like, okay, well, like the timing of Bitcoin is what weirds me out. I mean, I think Preston was one that brought it up, where he was talking, like joking around, like it could be from the future, or I forget who was one that brought that up, where it's like somebody brought it from the future, and Satoshi Nakamoto was just a time traveler, dropped it off and went back to the future to see what happened, and fix the world,
You never know.
It's like, where did he go? He dropped off the face of the earth and dropped this really, really impressive code that would just completely fix the entire world's monetary supply. And, like that, if that actually happened. But the other thing about it is like the way it's crafted is so ingenious. Like the rebel in me loves it, because, how do you like, you can't hide from taxes, but you can do smart things to not have to avoid it. And so one of the things that you can do is called, I don't forget what the exact term is, but like tax avoidance, something along those lines. But it's legal. It's a legal way. And one of the videos I'm going to be posting soon is like how to legally not to pay taxes on Bitcoin. And it's because it's an asset and they're defining it as an asset. So it's like a Trojan horse. It was crafted meticulously as this Trojan horse where it's not a currency. And so that's why I laugh at the Dogecoin crowd. They're like, we're the next people's currency. It's like, oh, you're the one they're going to go and call security and they're going to go after you because they don't want you to be a currency. They don't care if you're a digital gold, like Jay Powell said about Bitcoin. They care if you say you're a currency. And so that's a huge, dude, that tell was huge to me and I literally bought huge right after he said that. I started going in big on Bitcoin when I'm like, wait, you're defining it as an asset? Perfect. I'm going in way more, because
say no more.
Yeah, because like you want to be in that category. Nothing else is being defined as an asset. Only this is. So if you have that, well, then here's the mind shifting moment is, and this is probably what Hillary would just realize and why she's addressing it to the World Economic Forum, because it's not cryptocurrency they should be worried about. It's Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, let's let them go after the cryptocurrency because there's really only a asset called Bitcoin. And there's not all of those, the whole word crypto is not even like in a Bitcoiner's mind really. But
the funny thing with Hillary saying that's undermining the US dollar, it's like actually if the US co-opted it, like the FDIC was pushing or is pushing to provide a regulatory framework so banks can like custody it and hold it on their balance sheet and like maybe even reserves, like that strengthens the dollar.
Her talking about it in that way almost makes me go, okay, well maybe that whole theory that the government made Bitcoin is invalid now, because if she's afraid of it, she's like the most, to me, she's like the most.
I think she's just an idiot because
I hope
she probably hasn't seen the FDIC is like working on allowing banks to hold Bitcoin, because if she knew that, I don't see how that's a negative for the US dollar at all.
Especially if we embrace it like they're doing in Texas right now. One of the things I wanted to talk about this real quick, like how it's a Trojan horse and why I think it's hope, because they want to get, taxes out of us, obviously. But if you save in Bitcoin and you need cash, you're now going to be able to get a loan against your Bitcoin from places like even Coinbase is allowing it now. But like Unchained allows you to actually watch where the Bitcoin is and get a multi-sig so you know it's not getting moved around. And you can leverage your Bitcoin, let somebody else hold your Bitcoin and then get a loan against it at say 8% or whatever, or 6%. And pay, so say you have $1 million in Bitcoin, you give them $100,000 because you needed quick money. You keep $900K in cold storage. You leverage only 100 of it, so you can keep some of it, or keep most of it and give them some. And then now you can get a $50,000 fiat loan against that $100,000 and only have to pay an 8% rate on that $50,000. And so you now have that cash you need.
Hat tip to Mark Moss. He does a pretty solid video of like explaining how you can do that too.
Yep. Yeah, it's insane, the leveraging of this, and most people today just don't understand it. So I'm trying to teach the precious metals crowd, like, look, you can leverage this, like let somebody else be your depository, get a loan against it, and then what does that save you? A 40% capital gain. So that's like what, 5 years of interest at that rate? That just because you didn't have to pay a capital gain on selling it. So if you were up big on your Bitcoin position, why would you sell it? If you sell it, you lose 40% right off the top. Why would you ever want to do that? Lose 30, 40% off the top when you can just get a 6% loan against it or 8% loan against it. You get to keep the upside of your Bitcoin. So the loan was probably free or you profited off of it. And then you get the cash that you needed to do whatever you want to do with a business or whatever. So it's like this leveraging agent of Bitcoin is just mind boggling when it comes to the custody of it, the network, and how you can move it around so easily. There's so many things that are just like, it's perfectly meticulously crafted for it to be to be here now, ripe, like 13 years after its inception or whatever, it's like the timing is too perfect. It's scary.
Yeah.
Like it just is mind boggling.
I think it's natural selection. It just happened to be like, because of the way it develops and everything, it's just, that's kind of how like nature works in the universe, is like what's needed is going to find a way to pop up into existence usually. Or and if it doesn't, everything just comes down, falls apart, and then the whole cycle starts all over again until eventually something does bud up that will provide a different solution for the problem.
So how do you think this plays out? Like, how do you think it plays out? So at this, as a starting point right now, because we've already played out 13 years of this, and it's worked so far. I believe around 13 years. How do you think it plays out over the next 2 year, like the next 1-2 years with Bitcoin? Like, how does this continue to evolve, and how does it actually? How do we get to a situation where Bitcoin becomes the reserve asset, of the world?
I think that that's more realistically like 10 years out, in my opinion. Um,
Some people think it can happen quick, but some people think it's like a slow, delayed fuse sort of thing.
that like I will give you that. Like a lot of this stuff has happened way faster than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
Like I definitely wasn't expecting us to be at 60,000 like yet. I was expecting that to be in like 2024 or something, which I'm honestly kind of disappointed in because I would have been able to stack some really cheap sats if we could have like stayed on that timeline. But I think where we're going in the next couple years, I think that we're going to see quite a few more, particularly Latin American and South American countries follow suit with what El Salvador is doing. Um, Even like maybe even like we get some African countries in there because so many of those I don't want to call them third world countries, but countries that are indebted to either the US or China, like they're to think that they're not watching and paying attention would be discrediting them significantly in my opinion. Um and the whole world is seeing what just El Salvador alone is doing with the profits that they've made off of when they first started getting Bitcoin, like building the pet hospital and whatever else they were building. I think they were working on something for education. Um, but we see this start popping up. I think we're going to start seeing some possibly more aggressive discussion from organizations like the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, definitely the World Economic Forum, like Hillary just did. Um, I think that they'll try and talk a big talk and try to scare a lot of their citizens out of custodying and holding Bitcoin because a lot of people are going to get scared out of it. I think that I think that it will be done in nefarious motivations. I think that these organizations are going to try and scare people out so they can get in relatively cheap. Um, I think that because of the fact that we're seeing so much Bitcoin flee off of exchanges, I think that we're going to start seeing some really weird volatility. Um, as far as just order books being thin, um, I think that the US is going to be surprisingly more acceptable of Bitcoin than a lot of us initially thought. I think that it's like that's another thing that surprised me is how many of our politicians are really like understanding Bitcoin and really like rallying behind it. Um, I think that the US is smart enough to actually follow through on what I was talking about as far as co-opting Bitcoin and strengthening the dollar against the other fiat currencies of the world. I think that if this happens, um, and I definitely give a lot of the credit to like having conversations with like Tina and like Preston Pish on Clubhouse. Um, I think that by banks custodying it and the US kind of co-opting Bitcoin as a reserve asset, maybe not as a country, maybe not to that level yet, but maybe just allowing our banks to do so will strengthen trust in the US dollar to the point of where we like really start to gobble up a lot of these other currencies. And I think that eventually it's probably going to be the US dollar, the Chinese yuan, because they're not gonna stop manipulating their currency and trying to make it seem like they're ridiculously strong when they're not. Um, I think that the EU is going to do some really funky things. Um, like we're seeing a lot of like the disagreements kind of playing out right now, just as far as just like I'm not any sort of expert on the EU because it's an extremely complicated relationship, but a lot of the world is pissed off at China right now. Germany is extremely reliant on China, and Germany is also like the provider of like the EU in general. So that's an extremely sensitive relationship over there. And I think where things get really weird is Russia is very much a dark horse, like they like to be. I think Russia is far more interested in Bitcoin than a lot of the community believes. There was something like 24,000 Bitcoin miners like went to Russia at one point, and everybody just stopped talking about it. Uh, I'm pretty sure they're gonna really be a dark horse as far as like, I don't know about co-opting or anything like that, but um, they're probably going to get emboldened by Bitcoin at least, and then they're probably going to try and take advantage of the chaos from the EU nations. And I don't think we're going to have to deal with any sort of World War III style of scenario. I don't see that as being like, any sort of world leader knows that that is not a realistic um strategy, because it always just, the only way it goes is that somebody's going to get so desperate that they rely on nuclear, and nobody wins at
I
that
think it was
point.
Greg Foss actually had brought that up, where he thinks that like he always, I mean, I think he said like just don't underestimate Vlad, and I would agree. Like, why would you underestimate him? The guy's not a fool. Like, if you listen to him speak, it's like the guy's very intelligent and
Yeah,
extremely cunning. Like, and so like it
that
just
makes him dangerous.
yeah, our media is like just bashes on him, and I'm like, this guy's actually extremely intelligent. You have to watch out for this guy. This guy is the
Yeah,
smartest guy in the room. Like and he's usually the smartest guy in the room. Is usually the most quiet and sits there, and like that's usually the smartest. Everything about his behavior tells me he's smartest guy in the room. But and then there was Greg Foss who said that it's interesting you bring up that same point. But Greg Foss had said that he thinks that they'll price their energy in Bitcoin. Uh,
yeah, I
that
agree
they'll
with that.
take.
I agree with that. And then I think that while Russia starts to do that, I think that at the same time, I can't remember who brought it up. Maybe it was Jack Dorsey himself, but I think that Africa is going to become like the next tech hub of the world. Not in 2 years, maybe in 20, but I think Africa is going to, like, because of the leaps and bounds and the leapfrogging that they're going to be capable of doing, which hat tip to Mitch Clee, one of the writers for Bitcoin Magazine. He like talks about the leapfrogging a lot. Um, I think that because of a lot of the efforts, like even if you like the Gates Foundation, they've been doing a lot of work with trying to provide renewable, like, wastewater to drinkable water, like, solutions for countries in Africa. And I think that they're going to be capable of doing the leapfrog as far as like, because one thing that the United States is very much hindered by is not only the geographical, like, just stretch of how spread out we are in our cities, but our cities are so old that it's going to cost so much time and energy and resources to try and upgrade them to the point of being like a truly modern city. Over in Africa, they've got a lot of resources there. They've got a lot of labor. Like,
Most of the
all
precious
that all
metals.
that all that they need to do is adopt Bitcoin, let all those riches flow into their country and their continent, maybe ditch some of the warlord activity that's going on over there, and all of a sudden that entire continent becomes ripe for upgrade, like serious upgrade. And I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting because I know Jack Dorsey's doing a lot of work over there. Because I think, wasn't he living over there for like 6 to 8 months out of this year? Like this past year, he was working on like helping a lot of the businesses use Square or something like
Did
that.
you see he just rolled out a decentralized exchange white paper?
Did he
I,
finally push that? I haven't
I
seen
think it
it.
was just I saw it on Twitter somewhere. I have to do more research on it, but Jack is like, I think he's got his hands tied by how big Twitter's become. But like I think
Yeah,
that he's actually really I'm still on the fence about it, but it's like I think he's actually a true libertarian minded guy. Like I think he actually is that, which is it's hard to believe because of all the different obviously the different things of You know, even our ex-president's not even on Twitter, like those types of things. But I think his hands are tied on that. You know, I think that's his something. But the moves he's making. I mean, Cash App is the workflow on Cash App is elegant. I owe Cash App for my first coin. Like it was an impulse buy back at like 7,000. You know, I had money in my Cash App. I'm like, I'll get a Bitcoin. And that was literally, you know, I just thought about it and that was it. And then like the thing is,
that's why 8x return off that.
That was a big one. Yeah. But then but I kept buying. At that point, I got addicted to it. And when I found out but once it doubled, like it went from 7 to 15. And that's when I started making videos being like, Peter Schiff's wrong about Bitcoin. Like this is some interesting stuff here. And I started researching more about it. And when I figured out cold storage, when I figured out how to move it off of Cash App into cold storage, because it's like, I want to protect it now. I'm like, oh my God. Like I got a soft confirmation. I didn't have to wait for, I could normally, like the joke in the collectibles industry is, oh, please God, where's the wire? Will the wire land? Please God, wire land. But you get a soft confirmation immediately knowing it's on the way. And I'm like, whoa, that's different. Like I know it's coming. It's not there yet. It's not confirmed yet.
And you
but
can
I know
watch them
immediately.
tick through. Like it's like especially if it's 1 of 12 and you just watch it like 2 of 12, 3 of 12. It's like, oh, this feels so good.
Nobody well, you don't understand it on a deeper level until you see it in cold storage and until you build your own node and you see it syncing up on the blockchain. You don't understand the blockchain. You don't understand the storage of Bitcoin or anything until you do those two things. And then you understand it as this block where I have the signature to blocks in this blockchain that sends it back to the top. Like when I found out how this whole thing works is just by literally going in. Honestly, I owe Twitter Spaces quite a bit because I was bouncing around talking with guys like you. You know, and going like, hey, I'm new at this, but I want to learn. You know, I mean, I want to protect what I got. You know,
and we're all just like, all right, man, let's do it.
You know, pretty much, man, pretty much. And that's why the information is so genuine because nobody stands to benefit. It's like me talking about Bitcoin. I have the bias because I own Bitcoin, so there's that. But it's hard to believe that I could control make an impact on $1 trillion thing. But I don't have like a monetary gain by talking about Bitcoin. If anything, I have a negative monetary gain because I could make money off of pitching gold like Peter Schiff, you know. But I think it's too brilliant to pass up talking about it. I think it's too brilliant. I can't help myself. And you know, the more I learn about it,
it touches too many lives and too many souls to like try and withhold that information.
So
in
true.
my opinion.
Exactly, man. Well, hey, just so you guys all know, his articles again are in the bio down here. And your Twitter handle is at Mike Hobart, right?
I had to do the Mike Hobart, like THEE and then Mike Hobart. Apparently somebody was smart enough before me to nab my name as a Twitter handle. So
you're not alone. You're not alone. Somebody took Rob Soltan and then they got suspended or something. And I try to contact Twitter, and I guess I'm not big and fancy enough yet. But maybe at some point they'll give it to me. But I have to be like RJ Soltan on Twitter. So it's annoying when you can't get this. My ADD it kills me, you know. So I know the feeling. But his Twitter handle and his all of his writings are going to be in the description down below. So make sure to check it out. Highly recommend it. Mike, you got to do these more often, man. You got to get your voice out there because the Twitter Spaces you're talking more. And you know, when I talk to you in Twitter Spaces, I'm like, you know what? You think big. You got an interesting perspective. You simplify things. You're about health. You're about different things. You're about like just reviving the American dream, which is something that I really resonate with, and I'm sure my audience resonates with a lot because we've been so brainwashed in a way where it's like, oh, we're supposed to go to college and we're supposed to get, you know, this job and we're supposed to work, you know, for money that's been inflated away. And this is all stuff not even taught to us. Most people, they might watch this video and they just learn about it now. You know, it's just insanity.
Likely, statistically, it's likely that this is the first time that they're hearing about it.
It's just crazy, man. It's just crazy. We got to do this again. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you everybody else for watching. Really appreciate you all being here. If you want to click the subscribe, would love that. If you want to click the like, would love that. I don't think they can dislike anymore. I think that's not even available anymore. So
yeah, I mean they can't dislike, so they might as well just do both.
If you dislike, I won't see it. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know how I feel about all that, but anyway, thanks again for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, I had a lot of fun. Let's do it again.